Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members and guests. It's December the 15th, 2025, and this is a regular meeting of the West Shore Photography Club. We have an image review tonight with 11 images, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But first of all, let me take this opportunity to wish everybody a happy holidays, stay safe, and have fun. Our next online meeting will be, oh my goodness, not till 2026, which isn't far away. It's going to be on January the 5th, Monday night, of course, and it's going to be a before and after session that will be hosted by our very own, right there he is, Mark Albano. Okay, we'll get information out to you in the near future about that meeting. I hope to have a lot of people participate. Now, let me just mention this. This is the type of participation where you can enter any image you want for any reason, just showing before the original image and then what you did to it. You could have just cropped it. You could have done all kinds of crazy stuff. It doesn't matter. We're interested in the story behind how you made the change to the image. So please consider participating in that event. I'd like to get some new people involved. When I talked with Rick Freer, now Rick Freer he's our website manager, and he puts together the images that you send in for the image reviews like we're having tonight. He compiles them into a PDF, which is then sent to our image reviewer, who tonight is Bryson Leidich, and sometimes it's Mike Donovan. But one of the things that Rick told me was he's concerned about the size of the photos that are being submitted. Many of the ones, or some of the ones, I should say, and I don't know the details about which ones, but some he said were really smaller than they should have been, which means then they're not going to be as many pixels. They may not look as good on screen. So we want to make sure that we're sizing them correctly. So in that regard, I dug up an older PowerPoint presentation that I had done and I revamped it, and I'll send that out tomorrow. It explains how, very simply, how to resize your images correctly for our image reviews. And it doesn't matter whether you use a Windows machine or a Mac. And I have separate explanations for those. If you use the Photos app on a Windows machine or the Photos app on a Mac, or if you use Lightroom Classic on a Mac or a Windows machine, it doesn't matter, they're the same. Or if you use Photoshop. So there's four different sections that explain how to resize your images. But I'm going to emphasize that you look at that and make sure before you submit an image that it is sufficiently large, but not too large. And the pixel dimensions we recommend, the optimum, are 2,650 pixels on the longest edge. So that will be the standard. And that's for uploading for our competition. Uh, but different sizes for different purposes like Facebook or emailing or whatever. But this PowerPoint deal specifically addresses the issue of uploading images for the image reviews for the club.
Hey
But you
Dennis,
can generalize that.
that's a good rule for show and tells too, and
Oh,
before and
yes.
afters.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about trips. Gene, would you talk to us about that, please?
Hi, everyone. On Tuesday, January 27th, we will be going to the State Library from 10 to 12. The people that went last year really enjoyed it, but I know there were some that wanted to go and weren't able, so I set it up for us to go again. It's really pretty inside. It's all Art Deco, so if you like Art Deco type things, you're going to love the State Library. Joe Farrell and I are working on going to the state capitol as well sometime this winter, not summer. I want it to be summer. So look for that as well. And hopefully we'll get some good trips going on indoors for the winter. So if anyone has any ideas or places they would like to suggest, Dennis can put my email on the synopsis for tonight's meeting that you'll all receive tomorrow. And I will take that to the trips committee. We're going to have our meeting in the beginning of January. So get those into me, something new, something different. Any suggestion will be looked at. So thanks and Merry Christmas, everyone.
Very good. Thanks, Gene. Okay. Anyone have anything for the good of the order before we get into the image review? If you do, please unmute yourself and speak up.
Why is Mark Albano smiling so much?
I'm just a happy guy.
Either that or he has a secret he's not telling us. Anyway, yes, let's get on to the image review. As I said, Bryson's taking over tonight, or is in control tonight. We always appreciate his input. He has years and years of experience. And let me just take a minute and talk about what you have to gain from participating. I mean, you're here because you understand what we're doing, but the image review, of course, isn't just for the folks who submitted the images. Yeah, I think you realize it's more general than that. And I hope when you listen to his comments, you're thinking generally about your photography, how you can apply these suggestions to what you do. And he has many, many good suggestions every time he talks to us about the images. So there's a lot to be gained in thinking and applying these concepts to your shooting. So enough of that said, let's get on. Bryson, I'll turn it over to you. It's all yours. We have 11 images tonight, so we're all set.
Good evening. I have a few thoughts on what you just said, and I think it's something that bears repeating or investigation or something. I had the advantage of some unbelievably good mentors when I was getting involved in this stuff. And you learn a couple of things. The first thing you learn is to not be overly sensitive to criticism. So one of my mentors said to me, you learn a lot more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. And I think that's something that you should keep in mind. Another thing you got to do is some people object to saying, well, why do I care how you would have done it compared to how I did it? Well, any other perspective that you can get on your image is worthwhile because it gives you something else to get into your head and maybe cause you to look at your image again from a different perspective and say, oh, I didn't see that, or I didn't think of that way, etc. So there's always a learning experience to be had. And I always encourage everybody to take advantage of it as much as possible. It's free, for crying out loud. How can you beat that, right? So with that in mind, if something comes up in the middle of a picture that strikes my fancy, I'll say something in that regard. Any other thoughts before I move on?
No, thank you for commenting. I appreciate that.
Well, let's go to the pictures and see what we got. Okay. That's good, I think. All right. Is everything?
Yes, looks good.
Looks good. All right, fine. We only have 11 pictures tonight, so I don't think this is going to take forever. Number one is The Gathering 3. Now, I don't have any idea what that means, except that titles can be interesting. I took an entire class from a photographer way back when. He was a PPA, Professional Photographers of America master with all kinds of gold around his neck. And he did an entire presentation on how the title of an image can influence how a judge views your image and possibly either affect it positively or negatively. And he had a couple of very amusing examples of things that I won't get into real deep. But the idea was that you can sort of suggest to the reviewer or the judge what you were thinking when you took the picture and maybe guide them along. And he said in several cases, he thought that the title that he gave the picture was very influential in the score that it got in the judging. So keep that in mind. It's, image number one is interesting, whatever. But if it can be a little more descriptive or a little bit more informative or have some kind of an influence on what you were trying to do, that I think could be very helpful. Just a side thought. This is interesting. These pattern shots can be either extremely good or not so much, depending on a whole lot of things. This one I think is good. I like it. A lot of pattern shots have a tendency to ignore any rules of composition. Of course, you've got so much going on. How much can you really have? But you're going to have some kind of flow. Here you have a little bit of a flow that's starting here. That's coming down, and that's because of the tonality and proximity of these to each other. That's fine and dandy. But in this case, that's not setting up any real flow that tells me that I have a compositional consideration to make. It's just simply a pattern. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's perfectly fine. And I'm okay with it. I think maybe just a few, I get real picky when I edit images. And one of the things I do is I look at the corners and the edges, and I always look at things that might be distractions. So if you have an image that has something like this up in the corner that's a little bit brighter, I think, than maybe it could be, and I'm nitpicking, there's no question about that. But here, this and this little thing here, I would tend to want to just take them down just a touch in order to keep them from drawing your eye to the edge of the photograph. And it depends on how much time you want to fuss with your images. If you're like me and you don't mind spending an hour or two on an image, that's fine. A lot of people can't think about enough things to do in that amount of time with an image, but it's a good exercise to get into. That brings something to mind, and I'll divert just a little bit as far as retouching is concerned. When I was learning to retouch in Photoshop way back in the 90s, I took an image that had dust and a few distractions in it, and I started figuring out how to use the clone stamp tool and do some retouching on the image. And cleaning it up from start to finish took me a little over 2 hours. So I thought, okay, fine. I have a little bit better idea of how to handle that now. And I eliminated all my retouching and started from square one and did it again. And I did it again and again several times until I got down to I could do all the work I had done in a little over 2 hours in a little less than 15 minutes. So I felt at that point in time, I had taught myself a lot about the clone stamp tool and how to use it and how to use it to my benefit. And that's an exercise that I encourage people to take. I think that kind of thing is valuable. So, all right, enough of the diversion. I like the picture, and that's the end of that conversation. Do we do the who is right away?
Yes, please.
Wait to the end.
Yeah, I think no. Let's do it now. I think that would be more
Fine.
educational.
Bryson, it's Mary Fox. It's my photo, and it's amazing you're picking out those little things. And I'm looking at this picture, and I'm like, why didn't I see that when I was looking at it? Because I did spend like a half an hour getting the little tiny dots that my eye was being drawn to that I didn't want to be drawn to. And I'm looking at the sides, and I'm like, oh, I should have taken that out and that out and that out, Anyway, the gathering is the gathering of flowers.
Yep.
And 3 is because there's 2 other pictures with the name The Gathering in it. So it's 1, 2, and 3, And the picture was originally a bunch of purple flowers with yellow dots, and that photo is called the yellow dots. And I just wanted to do it in black and white. I just loved it in black and white as much as I did color. So I thought I'd throw a black and white one in, but and it was at the end of summer, almost fall, and it was at Adam Ritchie Park, and it was like the tail end of the flowers. And that's it.
Very nice.
Thank you, Dennis. I like your ideas.
Retouching follows the law that painters have about their images, and that the idea is nothing is ever finished. It's just abandoned.
I
So,
agree.
so you keep going until you can't stand it anymore, and then you think, yeah, something else to do.
Gonna make more changes, Bryson. Thank you.
Very nice.
Yeah, just a
Okay.
quick comment, if you don't mind, Bryson.
Pardon?
I think this is a type of image that would make a very good texture layer at a low opacity. So you bring it into Photoshop on top of a base layer and just lower the opacity way down and just let that pattern show through a little bit and could add a very nice texture to maybe a
Yeah.
bland sky or an ocean or something. Yeah, just make the base picture a little more interesting.
Yep. Thank you, Dennis.
Very good. Number 2, Myanmar. Now, when you had discussed something earlier about the image size not necessarily being appropriate for entry, that led me to believe that maybe this image was one of the ones that had that issue. And I could be wrong about that, but I just see some strange things. Like I see sharpness here, but this seems to fall off in sharpness over here for no apparent reason. Now there's motion blur here. That's perfectly obvious, and that's not a big deal. So I'm just curious as to what maybe caused certain areas of the image to be not as sharp as I thought they could be. So maybe that's the reason. I like the picture. I like the composition. I like the storytelling aspect of it. I think the colors are interesting. But when you go to the colors, I see something, and this is something that it's hard to train yourself to do. But there are ways of analyzing an image, and my way of analyzing is to go to the neutrals and the grays. And if you go up in here and you start analyzing this, you'll see that you've got a bit of a cyan over cast to the image over the entire image. And you go, well, okay, big deal. But if you fix that, and it's even though it's minor, as soon as you fix that, you see a whole lot of the other end of the color spectrum, which is the reds and oranges, all of a sudden come to more life. So if you remove that cyan cast up here, you'll find that a lot of the oranges and reds and yellows down in this neck of the woods have a new life of their own. They become a little bit more forward. So paying attention to the neutral values of the neutrals and of the blacks and whites is, I think, very important in the editing of the image. Enough said.
Bryson, this is Joe Farrell. Thank you. This is my image, and I don't see the sharpness that you are commenting on. I think that to me that looks more like a depth of field issue, but I may be totally wrong. But I do have a question for you, and that is the color cast. How would I go about adjusting and fixing or altering that color cast?
Well, in the initial processing from raw, it depends on where you pick your white balance. And if you pick your white balance on some of these middle to lighter grays, that should give you a pretty good start. If you do you work in Photoshop or do you stay in Lightroom?
Generally, I stay in Lightroom.
Okay. That would be the thing that I'd primarily do. You could also do some other adjustments in I can never remember the titles of the different we call them the areas for your fixing over on the right-hand column. But if you go to your colors and pick your neutrals and then see if you can take a reading, you look at your histogram at the top, you'll see numbers underneath. They'll show you usually show you an RGB set of numbers. And if you see them as being fairly close to each other, then you've got neutral. If you see one of them stepping out of line, then you've got a color cast to deal with, and you want to fix that. So you'll find that if you can get rid of the high or low number compared to the other two, you'll begin to pull the image back into neutrality. And the neutrality is important because everything else plays off of that. And so you don't, you don't see the color cast, for example, in the red. You don't see the cyan in the reds. You don't see the cyan in the oranges. You see it in the neutrals mostly. If that makes sense to you?
Yeah, okay. That's something I'm going to have to investigate and maybe check into that. So, because I'm not familiar, because I don't normally do that. I use the white balance tool to do that, but I guess I need to find a different way. Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, the other thing is I find that when you have a range of black to gray to white, you might want to try clicking various ones, different areas with that white balance tool in order to see what change, because you can get a change that you don't expect, that's stronger than you expect. And then, of course, you can decide which one you like. Okay.
Okay. You did mention earlier about the crop tool. Would you do any cropping on this one?
I might lose a little bit at the top, but not very much. I don't see anything that bothers me. I think my biggest rule is to, use either, if you like the rule of thirds, that's fine. Um, I like a little tighter than that, but you just see how things fall with the overlay once you have the crop tool in place, and then play with the edges to see if anything makes more sense to you.
Okay. Okay.
Golden rectangle is my preferred. It says the intersection points move slightly more to the center than they do with the rule of thirds. If you hung around me any length of time, you'll know that I'm not a big fan of rule of thirds. To me, the rule of thirds is a simplification uh, of composition for the purposes of learning in the first place. But once you've gotten there, there's other things like the golden rectangle that just seem to more carefully analyze the image and balance things a little bit better. That's up to you, So.
Okay.
Hey,
Thank
Joe,
you.
a point of clarification. Knowing you as I do, I don't suspect that sizing for this image would have been a problem.
Right.
You
I
you would
agree.
have sent it to Rick at plenty large. Is that correct, Joe?
Yeah, I think so. Right.
Yeah.
It's a high resolution camera, and I typically, when I do this, I don't scrunch them down too much.
Okay. And Bryson, a point of clarification on the white balance. Do you normally stick with a neutral white balance? I know there are a lot of people who favor a warmer image.
Well, it depends on the image. I mean, everything is up to you.
Mm,
So a white balance is usually a place to start as opposed to a
okay.
place to land. I use a white balance as a starting point because it gets rid of obvious problems. But then I will very often move to a warmer neutral myself because I like warmer pictures. But it does depend on the image. I mean, you could some images you look at them and just a cooler white balance makes more sense.
Okay.
And so there are no rules there. That's just simply a means to an end. So you start there and then you decide where you want to go.
Yeah, if you have people in the picture, do the facial tones pretty much determine your white balance for you?
Uh, well, I still use the neutral white balance as a start because it
Mhm.
gets rid of uh, tint shifts more than it does color temperature. So if you have a magenta or green cast, which you can get sometimes from bounce light, like from grass or sky from through a window, you can get a color cast that doesn't make any sense to you. And that white balance gets rid of that for the most part. And then I go in and check on the faces. But um, that can be a real time consumer because faces can be uh, very, very different. And I had one, just to tell you a story, I had one group that I used to photograph every year, and there were 9 people in the picture. 8 of them looked fine, and one guy was always just looked really weird. He had very magenta complexion, and it stood out like a sore thumb. So I would, quote, fix him and make him look like all the other people. And he never objected to that, but because I guess he didn't see himself that way. But boy, if you look at him in a photograph, just stood out like a beacon with his pink face. So
Of course, one thing for our viewers to keep in mind is that when you're adjusting the white balance, you're affecting the entire image. And then
that's
when you get into doing things like Bryson is talking about, adjusting the tones of an individual's face, then you're going into more selective work.
yes, absolutely. Um, you need to pay attention to the overall to begin with, but that doesn't mean that you can't adjust other things different ways. Excuse me. Flowing vision. I see this as an overlay of one image over top of the other, so you've got equivalent to a double exposure, if you will, and that's fine and dandy. The problem I have here is that I see a symmetry happening, which leads me to believe that this is the center of interest, and then I've got the overlay, which is pretty much destroying the center of interest. So my analysis of this, and I'm guessing as to how it was done. But if you're going to first lay the blurred over the unblurred picture in a layer, then I would use the transform tool to adjust. You can make the overlay picture bigger or smaller, etc. But you can also move it around, which means that you could put these anywhere you want them to be, not simply laying them directly right on top of each other and living with it. So I would have moved that so that this entire area would have gone off to the right and left the center of interest undisturbed, if you will. Um, Interesting image. That's about it.
Okay. Mary Eileen.
Yes, sir. It's not an overlay. It was I was playing with different, I guess, effects. This is a combination of a longer exposure than necessary to get those flags. It's the
Yeah.
flag corps for one of the high schools. And
Oh,
and
okay.
they were practicing before the holiday parade. And the person in the center is apparently the faculty person in charge of them and or in charge of the group, I guess. So it was a kind of a combination of a longer exposure to get those movements from the flags and a little bit of intentional camera movement.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot more sense now that I know that as to, what's going on here. Um, I trust you made more than one image.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did, but
So-
this is a singular one. I didn't overlay anything.
Right. Okay. But I'm just saying, I think if you were photographing this and playing with that you would make a number of different shots
yeah,
and
yeah,
then make your decision later as to
yeah,
what worked
yes.
best. Yeah, good.
That is correct. That is correct. I did do a little bit of trying to bring out that center person a little more. And I did put a Gaussian blur, now that I think of it, a little bit of a Gaussian blur over it, but not a lot, because I didn't want it to be too blurry.
Hmm. Okay.
But I was playing around. I was playing around trying different things, and this is what I got. This is what I
Well, I always
produced.
encourage playing around. That's the way to do it.
Yeah,
Because you never know what you're going to have until you're done playing, right? Good.
that's right. That's right.
Any
Very
idea
good.
what your shutter speed might have been?
Oh, I can't remember now. I
Okay.
should have looked. I should have looked those things up before, but and written them down, because I like to tell. I like to say I have paper brains. If it's not written on a piece of paper, I don't remember it.
Yeah. What
But
would your guess be, Bryson? What would your guess be on the shutter speed?
Oh, I have none.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking like a second, fairly long period of time.
it was a little. I think it might have been about a second. Yeah, yeah, it would have to be maybe about a second.
Yeah, I don't think it was a lot longer than that because the blurs would have been even more dramatic
Oh yeah, yeah.
the colors would have been faded. So yeah, yeah. A second or
Yeah.
so sounds about like a good guess.
Yeah, thank you.
Stada. The elements in the image, the composition of the elements in the image, the way this comes around at the side and this comes around at the side, make the image look more distorted than it really is. This has perspective distortion, and I'm going to tell you how to fix that in one click. I have a tendency not to be a fan of things that are tilted one way or the other unless it's intentional. And I wouldn't find this to be intentional if I were taking the picture. I can see where the lens would have created this for you just simply because you tilted down and or up, and that's why things happen the way they do. When you take a wide angle lens and you tilt it up, the buildings lean in, you tilt it down, the buildings lean out. But if you put this in Lightroom and you look for the transform panel, there's at the top there's a group of tabs, and one of them says auto, and all you got to do is click auto, and this thing will straighten up, and then all you do is crop off the leftover stuff in the corners that it couldn't deal with, or work to fill them in with some other method. But I think this would be a really easy fix. It's an interesting picture and an interesting play. Nobody gets to see this stuff unless you travel the world. So it's always interesting to see. The colors are well done. I like it.
Okay. George, comments?
No comments. We were at a wedding in northern Germany before we went traveling through Eastern Europe, and that was the town about 20 minutes from where the bride lived. And I went there 3 times to get the where there'd be no wind, so I could catch the reflections of the building. And went long exposure, which means the boat shook. So I had to use one of my short exposure boats and cut and paste it in. And yeah, well, I appreciate the comments about the exposure. Unfortunately, I don't have Lightroom, so I'll figure something out.
Any idea what the focal length of your lens was?
Oh, I always love shooting at 14 millimeter.
Oh, okay.
I shoot all my landscapes at 14. And this one, I might have been able to tilt the lens a little bit further down, but I wanted to get I wanted to get the lead in to the left, the fencing. I wanted to capture the canal and get the clouds and of course the buildings on the upper horizon.
Very
I
good.
understand what you're saying about perspective. I know it's a tough nut. So
Okay. A visit to the Cat Cafe in Carlisle. This is where the title makes a lot of sense and helps the picture quite a bit. This would be a very nice picture to accompany maybe an article in a magazine about the Cat Cafe. So, it's a storytelling picture and it's well done. I like the limited depth of field, which keeps your attention on the cat. The only thing that bothers me is this woman, like she looks like she's about to rip this poor cat uh, apart with those very strange nails. So I think if I'd have taken a few shots, I would have picked something that didn't look quite as aggressive in that respect. But other than that, I have no problems with it. I think it's kind of nicely done.
Okay, Patrick, comments?
Thanks. That's that is one of mine. Um, and I hadn't noticed the nails before. I think I will go back and re-edit that, make those since it's that plain background behind it. I can make those a little less cat-like. Um, she actually has she's gotten addicted to the Cat Cafe now. Uh, I took her there for the first time. She's taken her 3 kids there, and she's had to talk them out of bringing home 2 or 3 cats every time now. It's a fun place, and the cats are in charge while you're there. They just sort of wander around at will and do whatever they want. A lot of kittens, so it's which that one's is a very young cat, so it's so they just kind of wander and do what cats do. So not particularly light. You can't. They don't want you to use flash because they don't want to frighten the cats. And it's mixed lighting. There's a big window in the front, and then some incandescent and some fluorescent light. It's a mixed lighting kind of a thing.
Nice. It looks like something I better do because I love cats. So,
And my entry into photography was through photojournalism. So they tend to look like they belong in a publication because that's what I'm used to shooting.
nice use of the crop tool. This is something I think a lot of people don't do enough. They don't spend enough time looking at the crop tool as a means of controlling how somebody looks at the picture. But this is obviously not the standard 2x3 or 3x4, depending on your camera format, aspect ratio. So I appreciate the way you brought in the sides and made things work. It looks very well done.
Thanks.
Bryson, was there a time when people would say, "Oh, you cropped the top of her head off"?
Oh yeah. And I go, yeah, I know she's got a top to her head. I don't need that. I really don't need that. That doesn't bother me. It's
Okay,
like
very good.
there's the other thing is people when they first start learning how to light, for some reason or other, think a shadow is a problem. The shadows are normal. If you put a light on something, there's going to be a shadow. Live with it. Get used to it.
Yeah. What do you think of the toy in the right-hand side behind the cat?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you could consider that distracting. It doesn't bother me a lot because I see something over here too, and when I'm
It's the
looking at
same.
the
That's the same
title,
toy.
it is. Oh, it's okay. You look at the title and you sort of figure, okay, I know what that is and why it's there, so I can't really complain about it. So I wouldn't bother taking it out or anything like that. I'd be
Okay,
fine.
interesting. Yeah, it's bright and colorful. I just
It sure
wanted
is.
to hear
It
your
does.
opinion on that.
Yeah, grab your attention. You could look at it that way,
Hmm.
but fine. Stacks of dust. Overall, I think it's pretty well done. I think it is probably too dark from a um, a perspective of. I tend to look at things and say, okay, if you decide you wanted to print this, what kind of problems would you have? And a whole lot of these darks would simply go black on you in a print. You, if you're going to print it, sometimes you need to educate yourself as to how far down you can go before the printer just can't handle the darks. If you put this into, well, even if you're in Lightroom or Photoshop, look at the histogram, you'll see that this probably is crawling up the left-hand wall pretty strongly with the blacks. I tend to personally with mine, I tend to keep that left-hand part of the histogram just shy of that left wall. And I also have specific numbers that I attach to that based on how I'm going to print it. That's a whole different thing. But if you just avoid crawling that left-hand wall, in other words, don't push those blacks down any further than they absolutely need to be. You can get real close to black and then stop. You don't have to go too far. But I like it pretty much. I understand um, where it was taken and what it is, et cetera. So I'm fine with that.
Do you have any suggestions for people in changing the settings on their monitors? Uh, we know that images look different on different monitors, and how can you be sure or fairly sure that your image is looking the way it's supposed to look? Are there settings on the monitor that you would recommend they change?
Yeah, well, you should calibrate your monitor, and there are cheap and expensive ways to do that. And there are some tools that you can use. Uh, One of the things that is a problem for a lot of people is that when you buy a monitor, especially if it's not an overly expensive monitor that's intended for photography, it will be way too bright out of the box. There's no question about that. So if you look at the white point, not going to understand that if you haven't done any calibration, but if you look at the white values, you're going to find a lot of those monitors right out of the box are 200, 250, 300 when they should be 80, 100, 110, 120 at the highest in terms of the brightness. And you say, well, won't that make my picture look gray? No, it won't, because your eye adapts to what it's looking at. And if you're looking at a neutral gray on your monitor, it's going to look accurate to you if you're and the settings are like that. But if the monitor is way too bright, then your picture is going to look too bright and you're going to darken it to compensate for that. And then when you send it to a competition like this or somebody brings it up on a calibrated monitor, it's going to tend to look too dark. So
Now, just a follow-up. For most of our people don't have calibration units for their monitors. Can you use the histogram and adjust the image so that you've got the tonal range, let's say from darks to brights, and use that as a gauge for whether your brightness is set properly on the monitor?
well, I would use that anyway. I'm just not entirely sure if you're not working with a calibrated monitor, how that would necessarily influence your ability to make a real good judgment.
Okay.
There are some ways that you can calibrate your monitor using software that's available for free on the internet. And so you won't use a tool. What you'll do is you go through a few steps to say which one of these images look better, too bright, too dark, or this one looks good. And then you click to the next one and it says too light, too dark, and this one looks good. And that at least will get you close to a reasonable appearance of the image on screen before things go bad on you.
Okay.
There's my favorite website is Cambridge in Color, color with a U, cambridgeincolor.com. And you can learn anything you need to know about digital photography on that website. And I'm pretty sure that there's going to be something on there that will tell you how to adjust your monitor as well.
Okay, thanks. All right, guess we're ready to hear from Mark.
Yeah. Yeah. Bryson, thanks for your comments on it. It was just starting to hit the left-hand wall, and I was nervous about bringing it up and making it too bright. So I'll go back and make those adjustments. The one question I had though, my wife thought that the lights along the lower left-hand side were a little distracting. Yeah,
No, they don't bother me. I think they kind of help, they lead into your image,
that's how I felt.
and I don't find them distracting at all.
Okay,
I
great.
find there's a little mark in here and maybe a little mark over here, here and here. I might think about looking at those little tiny details, but this doesn't bother me at all. It's logical, it makes sense, so it doesn't bother me.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. When you do tabletop setups, one of the things that I learned way back when was you do your setup to get the idea of what you want to accomplish. So you play around, you take a picture, you move things, this, that, and everything else. The next thing you should do is clear everything off of the set and then go back and put them back into place the way you think they need to be. And you're going to discover that the second time you do it or the third time you do it, uh, you'll do it similarly, but you won't do it exactly the same way. And you want to analyze the differences between those shots and what works better than something else in order to be compositionally balanced and feel pretty good. In that regard, I look at this and I see a couple of things that I would change. I like the idea. I like the overall concept, if you will, of the picture, but I find a couple of things a little distracting. First, you get this, whatever this thing is in the background, white with the red on it. I understand that you're seeing it's being transmitted through this glass, and that's interesting, but I do find it a little distracting, especially sticking out here at the end. I also find this white here distracting. Part of that, I think, is because I think the highlights portion of the image is brighter than it needs to be. I think the overall contrast is a little excessive. Um, when you're running this through the histogram, you're going to find this background is going to slam up against the wall. That's perfectly fine. What you want to do is you want to say, okay, the black's in here on the pen and in here and in here. Where do they fall? Because they're the important elements of the contrast that you want to control. And very often I'll find that I'll take and I'll run the crop tool and I'll just pick a very small area like this that has the blacks in it and see how they fall on the histogram in that cropped area. And that can help you make an adjustment. And then you uncrop it, of course, and you get back and you see how that affects the entire image. I think the whites are a little bright. I think one of the reasons for that is, of course, your overhead light is not diffused in any way, shape, or form. It is really hard. So you're getting these very distinct hard shadows. And of course, when you do that, you also get higher contrast. So you want to be careful in that regard. Compositionally, I think what's going on here is pretty good. It needs to balance over here. And this guy sits way too close to center for me. I would want him to be out in here somewhere in order to balance against what you set up over here. So this belongs here. So this has to move out in order to balance better. This is running a little close. This is running a little close. I would back this candle thing back just a little bit to allow more space in here. And then maybe a reflector card would pick up a little bit of detail in here and possibly finish the detail here so that this separates from the background. And that would be very easy to do with a white card. And that would be the end of that. So, but I encourage this kind of playing because it can teach you a lot about composition.
Very good. The creator was David Marchetto, who's not able to be with us this evening, but he asked me to thank you for your comments, and he's looking forward to seeing the recording.
Very good. Just a real quick side note. I had one image that I worked on for almost an entire week, and then got up Saturday morning and tore the thing down all the way down to square one and rebuilt it. And that final image got a very high score in professional competition. So it's worth the effort, if you will. I have no idea what warp and woof means. So, from the standpoint of a title, you want to make sure that if you give a title, it may mean something to the reviewer. Maybe the maker can explain that to me, and that'll be fine and dandy, and I'll be happy with it. I like the composition. I like the verticals or vertical and all that stuff. And you've got a off center, roll of thirds type of a division over here. So the balance is good. I like the tonalities are good. I don't see anything particularly disturbing about the image. So it looks to me like you did a good job.
Thank you, Bryson. It's Elaine Shook. Let me explain warp and woof. The literal meaning of warp and woof is the crosswise and the lengthwise threads in textiles that holds the fabric together. I use this in a metaphorical sense, which, by the way, is the name of a series of various places in New York City that I have started. Metaphorically, it means it's the fabric of life in New York City, which in this case, or my intent is to show the contrast between old and new. I find New York City very fascinating in that context, in that even with all of the progress and the modernization in New York City going on, the old is still very vibrant and very, very prominent.
Oh, yeah.
In the sense that the history of that city will always be the foundation or the fabric of that city, and the modernization just builds on it. So
Yes.
the history is just, it's what New York City is all about, and it will never go away. And my intent in this photo, which is not quite as dramatic as it is in some of my other images in this series, was to show a lot of this old in the foreground, but you're kind of walking in time towards the future in the back, where the buildings are becoming progressively more modern. So it's more of a conceptual thing than it is literal, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, very good. I shot a lot of buildings in my day. That was one of my primary things. And of course, everybody wants you to shoot their brand new buildings. So I did a lot of new stuff, but I always found the older stuff to be a lot more visually interesting. So I understand what your thinking is there. Very, very nice.
Thank you.
Sleepy Oak. Too bright is my initial reaction to this. I have photographed things like this myself. And I think if you take the overall exposure on this down, you will discover things that you're not seeing right now in this picture, including better color saturation as you get some of these whites down, brighter areas down into a color range that has a little bit more visual impact to it. So it's too bright. And now, from the standpoint of exposure from the camera, I would consider this as an exposure coming out of a raw file to be dead on. I like my raw exposures to be the ETTR concept, the exposed to the right concept where you make the image as bright as it can be, excuse me, without flipping the highlights. Yeah, hang on a second. Let me see if. Anyway, then you deal with the white points, the black points, and the exposure in order to bring the image down into the area where you want it to be. If you do that from a technical standpoint, what you're doing is you're capturing more information. You can always make an image darker and not lose information because there's more information as you go into the higher values than there is in the lower values. If you underexpose and then try to brighten something up, that's where you get noise because you begin to have things break up. Excuse me, break up on you. So I would say this is a good starting place from a raw capture standpoint, but then I would darken it down. I would also then consider vignetting, especially on the bottom of this corner and then around here, in order to tighten that up. That's about it.
All right. Comments, Bob? Let's see if is Robert Bill with us tonight? Doesn't appear to be. Okay, we'll move on.
College of St. Thomas Aquinas. I know these are part of that, not structure, but part of the environment around the building is these balls. I don't know what they are, so I won't pretend to understand exactly what's going on. It's just somewhat interesting. You could also call this, see now, day 14, number 7, that doesn't mean anything to me from the standpoint of a title, but I think Attack of the Bowling Balls would be maybe a little bit more descriptive. The overlaid texture is interesting, and I think it's not inappropriate. I think it's pretty well done. You see it mostly in the building. Incidentally, if you're going to do that, don't have anything to drink, I'll be fine. If you're going to do that, and then you decide, well, that's fine, except I don't want that texture to be everywhere. If you're working in Photoshop, of course, you can mask it and paint them out, but you can also work with a thing called blend if, where it allows you to play with the certain values. You say, I don't want the blacks to end up playing with the image here. I want the whites to do this and that. That's a little bit more complicated concept to deal with than most people are used to. But I think the overall effect is pretty good. I don't have any problems with that at all. So pretty nicely done.
Yeah, thank you. That's mine, and I have to laugh and apologize for the title. I was thinking and thinking and thinking, and I actually thought I gave it the title Outside Classroom, so my bad. It was in Lima, Peru, and I just found those big balls interesting, and I tend to think they were seats for kids outside, make like an outside classroom. And then in Snap Art, I applied a texture to it. So yeah, thanks for your comments. And Bryson, I wrote down your suggested title. I like that one a lot better.
Attack of the Bowling Balls. Yeah.
Right.
There you go. Why not?
Uh,
Going for the humor is never a bad idea, right?
exactly.
And last but not least, Octorora Morning Fine. Now here's, at the very beginning, I had said something to Dennis that I thought people don't use the crop tool as much as they should. And this image jumps out at me as being a prime example of accepting what the camera handed you because you saw this and you took the picture, and that's fine and dandy. But boy, I want to tell you, I took this into Photoshop and immediately applied the crop tool. And there's just the point of the crop tool is to get rid of unnecessary information, make sure your horizontals are horizontal, and make sure your leading lines work very well for you and everything. If you put the crop tool on this and you come down from the top, you can come all the way down into this clouds if you want, or you can stop a little shy, or you can fuss with adding a sky or changing the sky or extending that. That's up to you. But getting rid of all of this space up here would be the first thing I would want to do. So that's going to bring your top down fairly strong. I could bring the bottom up, maybe put this in the corner. So you're going to take this much off the bottom and you're going to take a whole lot off the top. And what you're going to end up with is a panoramic shot that has a much more balanced feel to it. And then, of course, you can darken the bottom, you can darken the top with gradients if you like, and do whatever you like there that finishes the thought process, if you will. But I would definitely want to throw a pretty strong crop on this in order to make it feel a little better, I think, in terms of composition. That's about it.
Okay, Doug?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yeah, I appreciate the comments very much, Bryson. Thank you. I'll have a look at that and see what I think. So thanks again.
Very good. Well, we're out of pictures.
Okay, if you don't mind me taking a minute or so, we'll open it up for discussion. So if anybody has any questions or comments for any of the photographers or for Bryson, the floor is now open.
I have a question for you, Bryson. In looking at the images, sometimes I say to I love black and white. I just like it a lot. And I look at them and I say, wonder if it'll be better in black and white as opposed to color, and then I flip them back and forth. Do you have any like parameters or suggestions of what type of an image would be really good for black and white? Like, for instance, the one Elaine showed with all that detail, to me, that would be a good black and white. And if it was a flower one, other than the one that Mary had with all those little things in there, it would not be appropriate. But do you have any thoughts on that?
One of the things that I do in processing is I change every image to black and white. Now, let me clarify that, because that's a statement that doesn't make a whole lot of sense off the top. I'll put a layer on. I work in Photoshop. I don't work in Lightroom so much. So I work in Photoshop, and I'll put a black and white layer on top of the image, and boom, all the color disappears. That's fine and dandy, but that isn't the way to do it. If you do that, and then underneath that, you put a layer that's like a hue and saturation layer, now what you can do is you can play with the saturation, you can play with the hue, and you can play with the brightness. And what will happen is the effect of that black and white layer laying on the top will change because the colors that are underneath it are being changed. So the blues might get not as dark, the reds might get darker, the greens will change, etc. So just playing with the hue of an image underneath. Then you turn the black and white layer off and look at what you've done to destroy the image as far as the color is concerned. It can be a real interesting thing to play with. But I do that for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that if you just simply eliminate the color from an image, even temporarily, it can help you make compositional decisions and see things in a slightly different way that I think you may find valuable. So, but as far as the type of image that makes it better black and white, I don't think there's an answer to that at all.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that.
Anyone else?
This is Joan. I have a question. Bryson, that description that you gave of changing it to black and white, I'm assuming that was in Photoshop because you're putting a layer on top. Is there any way to play with the hues and saturation of the black and whites in Lightroom?
I'm sure there must be, but I think Dennis would probably be a better person to ask that question.
Yes, yeah, I can comment on that. Yes, absolutely. In fact, when you convert it to black and white, you go down to the panel on the right-hand side, the color black and white panel, and it'll show you the individual colors. And what I typically do is I just take one color at a time and move it back and forth, and that changes the intensity of that color in the underlying color image. And as a result, what you see in the black and white images, that color gets brighter or darker. So I just go down through the first one, second one, third, and try each one of the colors and see how that changes the visual relationship of the objects, the different colored objects within the scene. For instance, if you had a red rose with green flower or green leaves around it, you can change the red to become brighter and the greens to become darker, which would make the flower stand out against the darker green leaves. So yes, absolutely in Lightroom Classic.
Wow, I can't wait to try that. I also love black and white and changed a lot of things to black and white, but I've never done that. You can
No,
also
that's the big step because a lot of people will convert to black and white and that's it. They either like it or they don't. But if you
right.
take that suggestion and you'll find it makes a big difference in your image.
All right, I can't wait to try that. Thank you both.
Sure.
That's even if you're not converting to black and white, if you're just working with a color image, playing with those sliders has another advantage to it too, and that is that you can modify like you said about the rose and the leaves, just changing the luminosity of the colors can change the impact that that's going to have. So if you darken those greens, you're going to move them back and allow the red of the rose to come forward a little bit more, and so that gives you a lot of control over the impact of the image by controlling the density of the various colors. So same thing, whether you're converting to black and white or you're just modifying the color. And I do that quite a bit too.
Yeah.
Hey, Bryson, Chip here. I have a question concerning that last image. It was Doug's. When you're talking about cropping, you crop to get what you want, but what if your intent is to print the image and that cropping throws off the aspect ratio? How do you play with, getting the crop you want, but maintaining aspect ratio if you want an 8:10 or 11:14?
Well, I got a very simple answer to that. Why do you care?
I don't follow.
I will print, take a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper and run it through the printer. I can take an image that's 8:10 and I can put it on that piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, and it's 8:10. Now, if I crop that down to 6:10, I can still put that picture on the 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I'll just simply have wider white borders. I don't really care about the aspect ratio of the image. I only care about the content of the image making sense to me as a picture. All right. So I'm not worried about it being an 8:10. I'm only worried about it being a good image. And then I will either mat it or frame it or do whatever it is I'm going to do for the final result. If you look at my images on my website and you go through them, you'll discover that the aspect ratio changes all the time. A little story about that is I had a client in Maryland who is an architecture firm, and I did a whole lot of buildings for them. And they wanted to decorate their one hallway with a number of images, so we made prints for them. And I said, "How big do you want them to be?" And he came up with an answer, and I said, "Okay, I think if we talk 16 by 20 as a basic concept for an image, that should work pretty well." He said, "Yeah, that makes sense." So we did that. Now, what I did was I made every image 20 inches wide. They were all horizontals. I made every image 20 inches wide. But then I cropped the top and bottom based on what made that picture look good. And I made the prints. And of course, the framing shop just did the matting based on my crop and everything. And we hung them up on the wall and everything. And it was a year later before he realized that they weren't 16 by 20, they were 20 by something else. And one of them was only 11 inches tall. So the aspect ratio means nothing to me. I don't deal with that. I think sometimes wedding and portrait photographers deal more with aspect ratio than other photographers do because they want to fit something in an album or into a frame or something of that nature. But that's something I gave up on a long, long time ago. If
Yeah.
that makes any sense to you at all.
Yeah, it does. I don't print my own images. I send them away. And the problem I ran into one time, I cropped, let's say, a flower the way I liked it, and I sent it away to get an 8 by 10 printed, and it came back with half the, part of the flower cropped off that missing that it wasn't the way I sent it.
That sounds to me like somebody modified your image in a way that it was not intended to be. So that, I
Well,
blame printer on that, not you.
yeah, okay. I have a new printing company now that I go with.
Yeah, imagine that.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, of course, from a practical point of view, Bryson, that means you're going to get into a custom matting and framing.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I do all custom matting. That one of the things that I do is I have a bunch of pictures I can't show you, but I have a wall of my images up here. The mats are all 16 by 20. And then the images just simply float within the mats based on the crop that I wanted. So some of them have bigger borders top and bottom. Some of them are a little bit more squarish. But the aspect ratio is never something that's locked into my mind.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Other comments, questions? See, this is a great opportunity. You've got a mind like Bryson Leidich that you can pick right now and ask him anything.
Oh, kick me, kick me.
I guess they've asked as much as they want. One last chance, guys. Speak up.
Okay, I'll ask one more of Bryson. Bryson, do you print much in black and white?
Yes. Looking here at my images, I would say of my favorites, 40% of them are black and white.
Wow.
I think if I printed based on some of my current thinking, that percentage may even get higher, maybe more like 60%.
Mm.
I'm a big fan of black and white. I really am. And I think it's a great way to see. And of course, I was raised with old photographers, We shot Tri-X. We didn't shoot that color stuff.
Well, that raises a question for me is, do you process, if you're looking at the same image, would you process it differently in color than you would in black and white?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And can you summarize like your approach?
Well, if it has color, the color is going to influence the way you see the balance of tones in the image. So it's like you said about the rose and the leaves. You want to darken the greens so that the rose stands out more, and the greens sort of move into the background. That may work in black and white, but it also can work in color. And very often I look at an image and I go, okay, everything in this picture looks pretty good, except the blues have a tendency to be way too dominant or prominent. So they're making a statement, and I don't like that statement. So I'll modify the blues in order to keep them from overpowering the other colors in the image. So that would be one way of expressing it in color. Now in black and white, that may not be the same thing at all. It may be that those richer blues translate to a darker picture in the black and white, and that looks perfectly appropriate. So that would be the difference that I would see there.
Okay, good. Thanks.
I have one question. So Bryson, do you print your own black and whites, or do you send them out?
I print my own. I haven't sent a picture out to somebody else to print in forever. Literally.
Thank you.
Bryson, I have a question. I know not everything looks good in sepia, but I am a fan of sepia, the color. What is your opinion on that? Is it just on like wanting a vintage look or something, but I do love that look or the colors of it.
Explain CPS.
Sepia, like browns or that old fashioned look. Does that make any sense?
Well, you're talking about a like an overlay?
No, just that that old like from the 1920s.
Oh, you mean like a sepia tone?
Yeah, sepia, right? Sepia.
Yeah.
Oh,
I missed what you said.
I am probably talking too fast. That's all.
No, that's okay. I'm not used to my new hearing aids yet. That's entirely personal. If you either like it or you don't. I don't mind the sepia tone, but if I go to sepia tone, which from a hue standpoint is going to be high 30s, low 40s, I'm going to move the saturation down, because a real true sepia tone has a tendency to be a little overwhelming to me. I don't like the impact of that. It gets to be too strong. So I'll go with the tone, but then I'll back down on the saturation. I use a color layer at the top to do my colors, and I'll make modifications to that based on what I think the image should look like. But I don't necessarily go to a specific tone like a sepia tone. I'll just deal with the individual component parts separately, and that a longer conversation than I think we have time for right now.
No worries. Thank you.
Happy to explain at any time.
Thanks,
Very
Bryson.
good. Very good. Well, we'll wrap things up here. Bryson, thank you very much. Informative as always. And thanks everyone for attending this evening. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everyone. And we'll see you back online on January the 5th. Okay. Thanks and good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bryson.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.